My character was almost killed in my first D&D session because I wanted to feed orphans. First things first, while this is not the worst horror story I've heard by far, this was still a bit of a sucky experience for me and my friend to have as our first time interacting with D&D. I hold no animosity towards anyone in this story as we were all young and this was years ago, but rather I want to share this story to get off my chest. The characters. Me, playing a Beastmaster Ranger with a direwolf animal companion, first time playing D&D. Wizard, playing a wizard as you would guess, first time playing D&D, pronouns are they/them. Barbarian, sibling of DM, Rogue, invited me and Wizard to play and introduced us to the idea of D&D as a whole, pronouns are they/she. Rogue, sibling of DM and Barbarian, problem in the story along with DM, pronouns he/him. And finally, the DM, oldest sibling of Barbarian and Rogue, also is a bit of an issue in the story, pronouns are they/them. Okay, so now on to the story. Barbarian, Wizard, and I were all really close friends in middle school, and one day Barbarian brought up that their siblings play Dungeons & Dragons. Wizard and I, not knowing anything about the game, were immediately super interested, and eventually Barbarian invited us over to play D&D with their family. During the time leading up to the session, both Wizard and I were super excited, and we both tried to learn about the different classes and races as best we could. Both Wizard and I ended up with super basic, practically self-insert characters, but we were both super happy with what we had created. The day of the session arrived, and both Wizard and I were stoked to finally play. But once again, we literally knew nothing about the game. Right off the bat, our party was placed in a relatively open area. If I'm honest, I don't remember why we were just dropped in the open, but as we were trying to figure out what to do, probably within the first 10 minutes or so of the game, Wizard walked forward into a trap that none of the party had seen and was immediately paralyzed. Obviously, Wizard and I were very caught off guard by this, and when we asked the DM what was going on, they responded by saying that we should have done a perception check. Wizard and I were confused, as we had literally no idea what a perception check was at the time, or how we were supposed to make one, but both of us just accepted that we made a mistake and tried to move on. The wizard was eventually released from their paralysis and the game continued. Eventually, the party came into a town and started to wander towards the nearest tavern to try to figure out what our quest was going to be for the session. Immediately, as we walked into the city, an orphan kid, described to be no more than 5 or 6, is said to walk up to my character, and specifically only my character. Now, something about me personally is that I have a giant soft spot for children and animals. Almost every character I play shares this sensitivity. As this was my first D&D character, I shared practically every trait with my D&D character, and as such, I immediately felt super attached to this little kid. The kid begged for some food, and without hesitation, I had my character pull out her rations and hand over a portion to the kid. Suddenly my character was flooded with a bunch of orphan kids, all begging for food. As this happened, I turned and asked the DM if we were going to a place where we could get more food, and if I had enough rations between my character and her direwolf to be able to feed all the kids who showed up. DM said that we were going to a place where we could get food, and that I did not have enough food for all the kids, but that if everyone in the party gave up the rest of their rations, we could feed all the kids. I immediately turned to the party and started to ask everyone to give up their rations and started to try to explain that we could buy more food, but I was cut off by Rogue. Rogue had been getting irritated throughout this whole interaction, but apparently this was the last straw as he narrated his character walking over to one of the children and pulling a dagger. He said, both in-game and out-of-game, that he was going to count down from 10, and if I hadn't left by then, he was going to kill the kid. I immediately panicked. As I mentioned before, I have a massive soft spot for children, and I was terrified that any of these fictional kids would get hurt, so I tried to explain my plan to the rogue and negotiate with the DM to try to make it to where I could have my character feed all these kids while the rogue counted down. I remember getting physically upset as the countdown was happening, both at the prospect that the rogue would follow through with this threat, and that I felt like no one was listening to me. Despite my efforts to persuade or negotiate my way into a better solution, Rogue reached the end of his countdown and turned to the DM saying he wanted to stab the kid in front of him. The DM didn't even make the rogue roll and said the rogue killed the kid and all of the orphans scattered. I was absolutely livid at this, and I believe at this point I started to tear up and I was on the verge of crying. I was visibly upset at these turn of events and had my character start to yell at Rogue. Admittedly, I probably got too upset over the turn of events at this point, but don't worry, it gets worse. Okay, hold on. The Rogue is entirely in the wrong here. It doesn't matter if this person got more upset than what might seem justified. A lot of people are really sensitive to depictions of child violence, and to have someone who you can physically see that the real person, is not going to feel good when you do this, when you attack a fictional child. You see them getting upset and you still follow through with it. And the DM to allow that to happen, I find that if I was another player at the table, I would just get up and leave. If I was the DM, as soon as the rogue made reference to this, I would tell them off right on the spot. It is just totally unacceptable to see someone who's obviously very sensitive about a certain thing and to keep pushing into that area of sensitivity. It's just... Anyways, on with the story. I'm gonna pause this story for 1 second to remind you to subscribe to see more videos like this. Anyways, on with the video. While the exact details of how the next event happened are admittedly very fuzzy on my part, since this story was years ago, the important part is that the party ended up kidnapped and taken down into the sewers under the city, where we were taken to have an audience with the leader of a secret crime syndicate that was apparently stationed in the city, and quickly learned that the child of this crime boss was the orphan that the rogue had stabbed. Immediately, the crime boss, referred to as CB for the rest of the story, no, we're going to say crime boss, asked the entire party who was responsible for killing the child. I, admittedly still being angry out of game, had my character rat out Rogue and explain the whole situation, only to be interrupted by Rogue saying that I had a choice of not killing the kid if I had just given up on feeding all the children. Then I pointed out that I was just trying to feed all the kids, and that if everyone had just given up some of their rations, we could have fed them all and then bought more rations. The crime boss then interrupted the argument and said that he had a decision about who was responsible. I admittedly was a little too proud at this moment, and I genuinely thought that the rogue was going to be punished for killing the kid. Much to my surprise, however, the crime boss had all of the guards grab my character and tie her up in a magical rope that no one could break. What? Huh? The rogue was the stabber. The rogue stabbed. What? I was absolutely stunned, and I didn't understand why I was being punished, as DM explained that the crime boss appreciated Rogue killing the kid because the crime boss couldn't have a weak kid? DM also explained that my character was being punished for being weak, and that the crime boss was actually supposed to be the final boss of the one-shot that we skipped straight to him through killing his kid. Back in the game, the crime boss explained that the party could have my character back only after they did 3 things for him, and that every hour the ropes around my character would tighten, killing my character in 24 hours if the tasks were not completed. Note, once again, this was my first time playing D&D, and I was no older than 12 or 13 at the time. I was incredibly upset, but at the time I didn't say anything because I just thought that this is how D&D goes, and I thought that I was just being a sore loser. But looking back, I know I should have let the DM know I was feeling upset about this. Anyways, the first task given to the party was a simple riddle, specifically the one with the seed, the chicken, and the fox, where you have to get all across the gorge with various rules about what can and what cannot be left alone together. I immediately spoke up because I already knew the riddle and knew how to solve it. I had my character ask Crime Boss if she was allowed to solve it. Crime Boss reluctantly agreed and had my character explain the solution. Crime Boss said my solution was correct and then said that the other 2 tasks had to be performed by the party with no input from my character. I was once again upset that I couldn't participate, but convinced the DM to let me control my direwolf instead of my character. Honestly, I don't remember what the last 2 tasks were, but I do remember that my direwolf was absolutely no help on those tasks, and on top of that, was completely ignored by the party members whenever I did try to help. So, I was literally left doing nothing while the party was having fun solving the tasks. I started to get more and more frustrated as time went on, and I really wanted to participate, but I knew I couldn't do anything. Finally, the party completed both tasks with 1 in-game hour left before my character would die. I was really anxious at this point for the party to get back to see Crime Boss so my character would be released, but relieved that the party had a whole hour to spare. Relieved until the NPC that was with the party suggested that the party stop for a leisurely brunch before getting my character? Honestly, I was on the verge of tears, frustrated, and as the party narrated going inside a tavern for a leisurely brunch while my character was minutes from dying, the whole party was having fun and joking while I was trying to get the party to go back and save my character. But all my attempts to ask the party members out of game to help was, "Oh, we have plenty of time, it'll be fine." Finally, I got fed up and had my direwolf burst inside the tavern. It was made to wait outside and physically try to drag the party members outside. My direwolf was just kicked out again, so I said that my direwolf would just bark and howl nonstop until the party left to go save my character. A bit annoyed, the DM relented and said that the NPC cut the brunch short and the party headed to see the crime boss, freeing my character only minutes before she would have died. After that, the session was practically over. I can't imagine we played for more than half an hour after that, but despite it all, I continued to play D&D and even played with the same group a second time where I was actually able to play and help the party through things. As said in the beginning, I don't think this story is the worst horror story I've heard, but definitely is a frustrating experience, especially for my first ever D&D game. Despite it though, I've been playing D&D for years now and have been running my own games for about 5 years now. So at the very least, I'm glad I was able to get through this experience without a bad taste towards D&D as a whole. TLDR, my character was taken out of commission for a majority of my first ever D&D session, all because I wanted to feed a child rations. Oh, and as a note, Wizard mentioned that they think that the DM and the rogue were being hostile towards Wizard and I because they were significantly older than us and they were Barbarian's older siblings. It is very possible that Barbarian kind of forced DM and rogue to teach us how to play and that they were upset about it and so made their goals to mess with us. While this obviously doesn't excuse the fact that they were unfair towards us, it might be a bit more of an explanation. I want to start off by recognizing the fact that everyone in this story is really young. OP's like 12 to 13, and based off the comments, Rogue and DM seem to be like within 15 to 17 range. And while that doesn't excuse behavior, and I think it's still important to talk about the bad things that they did, I also don't think that we can judge the present people today for what they did years ago when they were in high school. So whether or not OP should have kept playing with them after that, I personally think that OP should have not continued playing with that group. But at this point, it makes no difference. They're not the same people they were back then. If they're still doing behavior like that, then yeah, don't play with them. But you can't really judge a person when they're 15 to when they're like 20, you know? The rogue saw that when they were counting down, they were upsetting the player, the younger player, the less mature player. And they still decided to go through with what they were doing with full recognition that what they were doing was upsetting someone. That is totally not okay, obviously. And this player, the OP, should not have had to deal with that person, should not have had to play D&D with that person again. Obviously they did, and it seems like things went okay after that, but that was just unacceptable behavior, far out by the rogue. However, I actually don't think the rogue is the main one responsible here. The DM was the oldest person in the group, is the person responsible for running the game. They generally have the responsibility of making sure that people feel safe and comfortable at the table, and they absolutely failed at that. Totally. The DM saw what the rogue was doing and saw that it was bothering OP, and saw that the rogue was continuing to do it, and just allowed them to do it. As a DM, we are allowed to say no to things. We are allowed to say, hey, you can't do that. There's nothing physically stopping someone in the real world from doing that, but you're not allowed to do that because it makes the game less safe for the real people playing it if you do that. And this DM failed to use that power that they have to block those type of things from happening, and made the OP feel less comfortable at the table. And that's fully on the rogue. It's fully on the rogue, but it's also on the DM as well. And not only did they allow it to happen, but they were put into a situation where they were able to create consequences for that action, which is what I thought what was going to happen when the crime boss revealed that that was their son. I thought, oh, okay, the DM should not have allowed that situation to happen, but at the very least is showing the rogue that there's consequences in the world for doing terrible things. I wouldn't have done it like that, but it would have been at least something. But instead of doing that, decides for no good reason to put it on OP, who did nothing wrong, in character, out of character. OP did nothing wrong and still got punished for the rogue's action. And then the DM commits one of the worst sins you can commit as a dungeon master. And not only that, they did it to a brand new player. They took them out of the game and said, hey, you aren't allowed to play anymore. You aren't allowed to have a fun experience. Everyone else gets to go off and have a fun adventure and have a good time. You aren't allowed to. And that's just not okay. I am fine with a party member being removed from the party action because maybe they have made the decision to go off and do their own thing, and maybe the DM just can't cover that story as much and just allows things to happen shorter and quicker. But to just have that player be, oh, you don't get to play, watch everyone else play, you do nothing, and you have no choice in doing nothing, I've decided you do nothing. Like, the DM made so many mistakes. And once again, I get it, they're young, and they probably wouldn't make the same mistakes today. But that doesn't mean that at the time, OP should have allowed that to happen. They shouldn't have. And now, when I say allowed that to happen, I don't mean that they should have made a scene, called them out, like, speak to an adult about it. They should have just not played with those people again. And once again, clearly they did, and clearly things worked out because they're still playing together. However, I just wouldn't have played with them again. And maybe I'm in the wrong here. Maybe this was a one-game mistake that they immediately learned from and grew, and this party is actually great and fantastic, and I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just reading a Reddit post. But based off the information that happened here, if I was in that same circumstance, I would just leave. You have to know when it's appropriate to leave groups. And when a party is actively doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable and doesn't allow you to have fun because they remove you from the game, those are plenty clear signs that you should not be playing with this group. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, you can click that subscribe button to see more videos like it. We also have a playlist on the side to see all the previous Roll for Reddit videos I've made. And yeah, thank you so much. This is the end of the video.